A pleasant day. Please be advised that the views and opinions of the host and guests do not reflect those of the station, the management, and its network. Face the nation. A pleasant day to our viewers nationwide. Welcome to our program, Face the Nation. As we converse the conditions we face today as a result of the choices we have made, people have made. Well, next week our president will deliver his State of the Nation address, and today we take a good look at the concerns and the challenges which the entire country face as a result of the leadership provided by President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. I'm Freddy Obando. Welcome to our program, Face the Nation, and joining us for our special session on this particular segment of Face the Nation, we are privileged to have with us Mr. Ricardo Saludo, who was a former cabinet secretary of former President Arroyo, and of course he is one of the better and the toughest minds that give us insights on what is happening not only here in the country but all over the world. So a pleasant day to you, sir, and welcome to our program, Face the Nation.
Thank you for your invitation, and I hope I can deliver something for your viewers.
The face of the nation, so important every year for an incumbent president. And if we are to look at this president, President Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos, what can we expect when the president delivers his second State of the Nation address next week?
Well, this is the first SONA that he will deliver after a whole year in office.
Yeah.
The first one was really almost like an address to tell the nation what his plans are. So now we will expect his report on what he's done. And on the whole, I think he has delivered, especially on the economic program. He expected that growth will continue, and it has continued, thankfully. Inflation is higher perhaps than the government projected, but it has not become double digit. So, and in fact, it's trending downward, which is why interest rates may follow suit, further boosting business. The unemployment rate is not too bad, no? And so jobs are being created. Of course, we'd like to have more jobs and better quality jobs. The one that hopefully will really take off, especially with the passage of the law condoning the loans and interest payments for land reform beneficiaries that have been unable to pay them over decades. That will hopefully liberate them from this constraint, give them their titles, which they can then use to borrow money to invest in their land. Hopefully, this is the hope that this will boost productivity in the agricultural sector. So, and that is crucial not only for economic growth, but also for inflation. Food prices are the main component or a big component of the inflation rate. And so if we are able to moderate food prices, not only does that help our people directly, but also reduce the inflation rate, which then also helps moderate interest rates and the exchange rate with beneficial effects for the economy.
Should we be pessimistic or optimistic in terms of what you've mentioned in terms of the impact it brings to the entire nation?
Generally optimistic, but then, the State of the Nation address and the government policies overall mainly focus on what's going on in the country. And we do need to look at what's going on outside the country, which may tend to have an even bigger impact on our welfare, on our growth, on our development than what's going on in the country. Of course, 2022 saw one major event, the Ukraine war, ramping up prices globally. We couldn't do anything about that. Nothing that the government can do can moderate that, except food production at home, and that it is things like that that we also have to be conscious of. So I would say the SONA is important. What government will do is important, but in many ways, the events outside the country could have an immense impact, a far greater impact on our growth, on our development, on our welfare, on our security, than what's going on in the country and what the government would do.
Now, when you talk about our economy and the impact on our people, I think one of the major concerns which the president has to deal with is food security.
Yes.
And knowing for a fact that he is the agriculture secretary, which he took to, I mean, he embraced it as
Yeah.
the one who could probably provide the solutions to our concerns. Do you think this should continue? Because the president has other major concerns which should be given attention
Yeah.
unlike when you just speak about food
Yeah.
security.
Well, I wrote a column that came out Sunday in the Manila Times, and then Monday in the Filipino paper of the Manila Times, Pinoy Periodico, basically listing the three big mistakes that the president made. And the first one, which is the least of his mistake, but it's one of the three, is taking on the agriculture portfolio. He has not done badly running the agriculture department. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that because obviously he is also tied up with so many concerns as the president of the country, he could not attend to the agriculture department as closely as a full-time agriculture secretary, or if you want an OIC, he's appointed a couple of OICs, health OIC, defense OIC over the past year, could have done the same. And that kind of setup would still allow him to give a lot of focus and attention to the agriculture department. I mean, that's his prerogative. If he wants to meet with them every week, he can do that as president. But at the same time, there would be a person there, a head, that would have authority to really look closely into the agricultural sector, immediately make adjustments in operations and policies to be able to ensure food supplies and keep prices down. And I think that's one thing that should really make him already name somebody. I mean, if he wants, it could be the current senior undersecretary, who was former Secretary of Agriculture, Ding Panganiban. He was Agriculture Secretary during our time under President Arroyo, or someone else. It's up to him. The point is, have somebody there who's actually watching every day what's going on in the department, being able to adjust to market conditions, which the president simply would not be in a position to do given his other duties, and especially if he's abroad. So that would be really one thing that I think should be done. And what happens to in the agricultural sector, especially to food supply and prices, it directly influences the inflation rate. And if the inflation rate could have been moderated somewhat by a full-time agriculture secretary implementing very rigorously the president's directions for the agency, that might have brought down the inflation rate a bit, if maybe 1 percentage point, and that has immense impact on the economy. It will bring down interest rates, it will moderate the exchange rate, and those are things that tend to either spur or hold back business. Yeah.
Now, would you say that our people are at least happy with the developments in terms of prices of agriculture?
Well, just judging from the recent survey, Pulse Asia did and SWSF do these surveys assessing satisfaction and approval ratings. The president and the government has been having high approval ratings. But the number one issue that people feel he has to really work harder on is inflation. And as I said, if there had been a more, an actual person in charge with authority to act on the food situation, which is the major component of the consumer price index, which is which determines inflation. If that had been given a person, an actual person in charge, then in my view, it would have moderated food prices, which would have lowered a bit the inflation rate, and that has big impact on the overall economy.
What are the bright spots in terms of what the president is doing, and it's well coming out with good results, although the concerns of our people are still there on a day-to-day basis.
I mentioned earlier the law that lifts the burden of repayment of loans from agrarian informed beneficiaries. That's a big plus. Hopefully, they can then move toward using their land to borrow funds for more productive investments in their land. Let's hope that they can do that. And here, you need, on the one hand, of course, lending institutions to extend those loans. And then secondly, assistance for the farmers to learn entrepreneurial business techniques and habits. What can become a problem is somebody invests in the land, undertakes a major, enterprise, and is not trained really in the business, so it might fail because proper business practices are not conducted. So that would be, I think, a big thing to look forward to if government and private sector can be mobilized to help the farmer really boost production. We're receiving a lot of assistance from abroad now, and this is, in my view, largely due to the president aligning the Philippines with the U.S., Western, and Japanese bloc, no? And they're now determined to really boost the country to ensure that this partnership with the Philippines will continue. And so there are pluses there, and we hope to see investment coming into the country as conditions improve and as the economy grows. The other thing, I guess, that people hope is that there will be less, or hopefully no more of these high-profile crimes that have been committed, especially murder and what seem to be political related killings. Now, will that happen? Well, obviously, the police and the Department of Justice have to do their job to do their job. But on top of that, what hopefully will help also reduce that is the reported reduction in the insurgency. So if these armed groups are weakened, or if not eradicated, then one source of gunmen, so to speak, or hitmen will be set aside, will be removed. And also, and so that hopefully will ease the crime situation in certain parts of the country that are where we see these groups operating. Negros is one of them, and we've seen a major killing there, and so other places as well. However, the thing to note is that going into 2024 and into 2025, that 2024 is the year before an election. So there may be maneuverings there that may lead to political rivalries intensifying, which unfortunately might lead to violence.
Should peace and order be a major concern?
I guess people don't feel that's a real issue now. And I'd have to say it probably helped that we came from an administration that was very strong on peace and order, the Duterte administration.
And the campaign against illegal drugs.
That as well. President Marcos has tried to, really set forth to continue that while at the same time avoiding reported human rights abuses. So that has helped. Another thing I think that's helping the peace and order situation is the economy picking up. Um, and then at the same time, I think it also helps peace and order, as I said, that the insurgency is toning down. In Mindanao, the Bangsamoro peace plan is unfolding, and you have really the Bangsamoro regional government coming into its own. There was a postponed election, but hopefully, things will move forward as set out in the plan. And all these things, I think, will tend to help reduce incidents. Yeah.
Would you say that the president has been able to make significant gains, which, of course, significant gains which are very important to our people, especially the more marginalized sectors?
Well, I guess I said the economy is picking up, and that's a good thing, and hopefully that will continue. He has an investment is coming in, perhaps not as much as what we would want, but there is a positive gain there. Unemployment is also picking up. And he has programs which we have to really see how they will be fully implemented. That's really the question. I mean, there is, for instance, a program called Busog na Bata Malusog, BBM, Busog na Bata Malusog, by newly appointed Poverty Alleviation Advisor Larry Gadon. And I hope that will really take off, along with other feeding programs of the government, because one thing we really need to address is the stunting that's happening to about a third of Filipino children, based on research, which stunts not only their bodies but also their minds, to the point that they cannot be as high achievers in school and cannot be high earners in the job market. So hopefully that will directly address this issue of making sure eradicating malnutrition in the first 1,000 days of life, starting from conception. Yeah, that's one. Second thing is we need to ramp up again, as I understand it, the vaccination. During the pandemic, vaccination
Should continue?
Yeah, kind of lagged. Now we have to catch up on that, so that especially the poor do not suffer illnesses that are preventable, which can really, greatly impact their learning for children and the earning capacity of the family. So thankfully we have a new Secretary of Health, so he can really push that program more rigorously. And the budget, of course, we expect will be passed in good time. And the aim is to continually increase the budget as a percentage of GDP. So hopefully that will continue, along with the growth in our economy. And I expect that Congress will expedite the budget as it did last year. And then these programs will then kick in and really accelerate growth in 2024.
Now, when you talk about the budget, which is a major item a major item that the president will present during his State of the Nation address. And one thing very noticeable, I think, is the fact that if you look at the budget and try to review it, well, you made mention about health. In the past, it was only 4.5% of GDP. But now I think it has gone up. And when you talk about agriculture, is also benefiting from the president's, managing our agricultural department.
Yeah. Well, of course, the budgetary allocations would first follow the constitutional
Yes.
provision that education should get most of the money. And that's really a strong point. And I would add, in fact, that one of the programs that was enacted in the previous administration, which may seems to be lacking budget now, is the funding for college education for the poor, and we hope that thing can be funded again, at least in part, because this obviously giving people a proper education makes them breadwinner for their families. Now, the second thing relating to the budget, it will have to respond to certain strategic thrusts of the government and the country. Health is important, but I think that the increase in spending of the past couple of years was mainly pandemic related. Now that the pandemic is gone, it will come down, but it should maintain specific strategic programs. We're setting up an Institute of Virology. Obviously, we have to ramp up the immunization program in certain diseases that tended to be neglected. And very important, the hospital upgrading and the PhilHealth situation has to also be sorted out. Now, one challenge in the health situation and a number of other sectors is that the government will need over time to implement the mandamus ruling of the
Yes.
Supreme Court, which would devolve to the local governments functions of government along with the budget. And this is fine in theory, but it is not so easy for a local government, even a province, to suddenly be able to set up or take over a hospital, for instance. It's not just money that they need. They need to make sure there are doctors there, etc. And so this mandamus ruling initiative really needs to be looked at to ensure that, on the one hand, it is implemented. It is a provision of law that, as interpreted by the Supreme Court. But on top of that, it's a very real challenge where local governments have to take on, in some way, the functions that are funded by the allocations now shifting to them. And even the World Bank, as early as 2 years ago, already said that this is a major challenge. And I have yet to see really a major program of government addressing that. Now the good thing is many LGUs are already quite capable. And so if you just put together their best practices and their implementers, their officials, to help educate, train those in the less capable areas, then this can work. And we ourselves at our think tank, the Center for Strategy, Enterprise, and Intelligence, we put together programs as well to help uplift, to help capacitate local governments in collaboration with LGUs that are already doing it. Yeah.
Okay, we'll continue with our conversations with former Secretary Ricardo Saludo, the Cabinet Secretary of former President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo, after we pause for these reminders. We'll be back for Face the Nation. Face the Nation. Please be advised that the views and opinions of the host and guests do not reflect those of the station, the management, and its network. Face the Nation. We're back with our program Face the Nation, and we are privileged to have with us the former Secretary of President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo. We have Rick Saludo. Sir, I think if we are to look at the current situation in the South China Sea, that has been, well, off and on a major story in terms of how we are managing our claim in the West Philippine Sea. But of course, there are certain irritants that happen. Would you say that this is going to be a major topic which the President will deliver, and how far will he define the impact of the impact of our claim, and at the same time the measures and moves being undertaken by the Philippines to ensure that we're able to preserve what we own, and at the same time refrain from any conflict that may arise out of this, out of the claims of both countries, the Philippines and China, when you talk about the West Philippine Sea.
Well, certainly the president has made statements before, very strong statements saying we will not give up an inch of our territories and territorial claims. And recently, the Department of Foreign Affairs came out with a website, Not 1 Inch, I believe is the name of the site, and it sets forth our position on our West Philippine Sea claims. West Philippine Sea, just for people to understand, is this area, the waters of the South China Sea, that are within our exclusive economic zone. That's 200 nautical miles from our territorial baselines, which is the line around our main archipelago. So 200 nautical miles from there, or about 370 kilometers, that's the distance we're talking about. We have exclusive right under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea to to make economic activities there, to extraction, exploitation of the area for economic gain. Other outsiders must get our permission to do that. We do not have territorial rights. That's not our territory. It's still international waters. But we have sovereign rights over the economic activities conducted there. Anyway, the point is that the president certainly has, made strong statements for defending our rights. At the same time, recently he has made efforts to strengthen and enhance ties with China. And in fact, he said last month that he sees China relations continuing to improve. His newly designated Defense Secretary then, Secretary Chodoro, also made statements that the Philippines will not be a pawn in superpower rivalries, which means we will not allow ourselves to be used as a kind of tool by any superpower, okay? And that fear, to some extent, is held by China because we opened 9 of our military bases to American forces. Now, the other thing that Secretary Teodoro clearly is showing is an openness to good ties with China. So even while, for instance, we had these continuing accusations about Chinese actions in the West Philippine Sea, including alleged harassment of the Coast Guard, and the massing of ships there. Even though that was going on, and we are raising issues about that, Secretary Chodoro received a courtesy call from Ambassador of China here. And they agreed at the end of the discussion that military relations between the Philippines and China would be enhanced. So that I think the president will highlight those two aspects of his policy. We will stand up for our sovereign rights in peaceful ways, while at the same time continuing to improve relations with all nations, China included. That may be a key theme in his State of the Nation address.
Now, this would have a significant impact in terms of winning more investments from China, if you were to look at it. And number two is you're speaking of tourism also. And if you were to look at what the president has been pushing in terms of what it brings to when you have peaceful coexistence with the neighbor, and then both the Philippines and China can work together some more realistic and peaceful conversations and actions, so that the conflict should be a cause for concern, but rather it's the cooperation that is more important for both nations like the Philippines and China.
I think this is what we hope. But I must say, if we agree to host American forces in 9 of our bases, that cannot count for nothing with China. You know, back in 1962, when Cuba agreed to host, it didn't happen, but they had Soviet missiles, nuclear missiles, being on the way to Cuba to be installed there. That was done by the Soviet Union because America had put nuclear missiles in Turkey.
Yeah.
So because of, during that move by Cuba, America, of course, there was nearly a World War III between the two superpowers. So that's how serious the whole idea of introducing major forces in a country near a superpower. I have to point to Ukraine as well. Russia said it wanted Ukraine to be neutral. It did not want the armaments of NATO in Ukraine. And when Ukraine and NATO would not, would not agree to neutrality for Ukraine and Ukraine not joining NATO, then you had an invasion. So we just have to be conscious that our decision to bring in American forces here cannot be just nothing to China. And in fact, the Chinese have said, and American war scenarios have also discussed it, that if the Philippines had American forces here and there is a conflict between America and China, those forces and those bases would be attacked. And as I said, it's not the Chinese alone saying this. You have American security analysts, war scenarios, talking about the same thing. It's only our media, a lot of our media and our politicians that are saying nothing about it. Our leaders are completely mum about it. The only leader who has spoken about it is former President Duterte. He said it on the SMNI television station, 2-hour interview in March, and another one more recently. And in both cases, most of the media snubbed it. That's how really, how mum our media are with regard to the danger that these bases pose. And by extension, if there is in fact this problem, you really have to wonder how far China will be supportive of people coming to the Philippines or companies coming to the Philippines. I'm not just talking about Chinese stopping these companies. If I'm a company in China, I will invest in the Philippines over the long term because investments are long term. It's not just 1 year, maybe 5 years, 10 years. And then at the same time, you have this consciousness that the Philippines may be at war with China because we have forces here that would be hostile to China. Am I going to invest? That would be the question. And I just have to wonder, whether our situation now of allowing American forces here would then give pause to Chinese companies. Now, tourists, no problem. They can come here anyway. They're going back after a week, But again, over the long term, if relations intensify, frictions intensify between China and the United States, and at the same time also frictions between us and China in the West Philippine Sea. Well, if I'm a tourist, I can go to many other places which don't have that kind of problem.
Well, we have finally come to the end of this conversation, but more interesting and very informative conversation has actually, in a way, enlightened us, at least to understand exactly what are the events that affect our security as a country and our relations with other countries like the U.S. and, of course, we're speaking of China and even Taiwan. But as it is now, when you look at the forthcoming State of the Nation address of the President, how would you want to hear what is truly an indication of the country coming first, and what's important is what should be undertaken by the president and delivered in a State of the Nation that will assure us that we're on the right course of growing as a major economy, and at the same time, while we have relations with other countries where, well, there are problems of misunderstanding regarding territory, can we finally find ways and means to ensure that we depart from any possible conflict that may arise because of these claims?
Uh, the questions you ask certainly to some extent would have internal policy actions that are needed. The economy, proper management of the economy will need to continue maintaining good fiscal balance. All of that is important. But one thing that people really have to look at is that the Philippines, what we do internally, can be very much superseded by what happens internationally.
Yes.
Our main problem the past year was inflation. A lot of that was because of oil and food prices escalating due to the Ukraine war.
Yes.
The Ukraine war is still there, and in fact, there's a danger it may widen depending on how NATO responds to Russia's what looks like a full-scale Russian invasion that may crush all Ukrainian resistance. So how that goes will greatly impact us. It may escalate prices again, especially of oil and food, and that will, we can't really stop that from
Yeah.
hitting us. But the other thing I think is that as the global superpower rivalry intensifies, China and the U.S. May be also ramping up. Recently, they've toned it down, partly because the United States doesn't want to have a conflict in Asia and another one in Europe. But Russia and China are now engaged in military exercises, and that just shows that both of them are in this together. And it may then affect us here, given that we have tied up with the United States. And I will just quote the Indonesian president at the recent ASEAN Foreign Minister Summit, and he said, it's important that the region move away from these intensifying rivalries. And I would echo the same thing. These rivalries can really disrupt things for us in the Philippines. Yeah.
A final word from you, sir.
Well, I'd like to just again stress the importance of looking at what's going on outside the country. We tend to just focus on what's, policies and actions here, but there's a larger world out there. I've mentioned Ukraine and the geopolitical rivalry between the United States, the Western Bloc, and China and Russia. I will throw a couple of other things that I think we need to really look at in the international stage. We've got El Nino, and these kinds of weather patterns,
Yeah.
unfortunately, partly driven by climate change, need to be looked at and prepared for. And so that's something that impacts us, both, especially in the agricultural sector. The other thing, very quickly, that I will note, and we keep watching these risks, both internally and externally. The other major risk that we will be facing, or some uncertainty, is the move by certain economies, and some people have said it's allowed 40 countries now to de-dollarize. What's de-dollarize? They're moving away from the US dollar as the main mode of exchange for
Currency.
trade and investment. And these include the so-called BRICS countries, Brazil,
Yeah.
Russia, India, China, South Africa, and several others. And that cannot be ignored. We will have to see how we stand there. And again, just making sure we look at what's going on around the world and how it would impact us.
Well, thank you very much, sir, for joining us here on Face the Nation. And I'm sure our people will be guided by you, by what you have shared with us here, and hopefully a better understanding of what the President will deliver in his State of the Nation address. So thank you very much for joining us. Former Cabinet Secretary Rick Saludo uh, Secretary Saludo was a former cabinet member of former President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo. So thank you very much for joining us here on Face the Nation. Face the Nation.